Welcome to Awkward Kitchen Conversations with Seth Jones and Danielle Wood.
Please respond to this video with hashtag #WhyAreYouInAKitchen.
The British policies included the Proclamation of 1763, which protected the colonies by not moving west. The colonists got angry about that. The Quartering Act required the colonists to provide food and living quarters for British soldiers. The Townshend Acts required that revenues be raised to pay the Crown officials. The search of private homes for smuggled goods could be carried out without intervention. New York's Assembly for Colonial Defiance of the Quartering Act was suspended, and the colonies weren't too worried at first, but taxes affected the merchants only. In 1768, Samuel Adams and James Otis wrote the Massachusetts Circular Letter to petition the Townshend Acts.
Another set of acts were the coercive acts, which were called the Intolerable Acts by the colonists. The Port Act prohibited trade in and out of the harbor until the tea was paid for from the Boston Tea Party. Massachusetts Government Act reduced power of Massachusetts legislature, increased the power of the royal governor. Administration of Justice Act, royal officials accused of crimes were sent to England for trial. The final thing that the Intolerable Acts did was that it expanded the Quartering Act so it could include all private homes in the colonies. Another act was the Quebec Act, which organized the Canadian lands gained from France, and it was accepted by the French Canadians, but not the colonists. The colonists were outraged by all the acts. The Quartering Act was thought of as a direct attack on the colonies, took away the lands that they claimed, and they fear the British would do the same to America and take away their representative government.
In July of 1775, the Olive Branch Petition was created by the Second Continental Congress, and they sent it to King George II. This petition pledged loyalty and asked the king to tell Parliament to secure their colonial rights. King George dismissed the Congress's plea, and in August of 1775, the Parliament Prohibitory Act was created that declared colonies in rebellion. It forbade all trade between England and the colonies. The colonial point of view was that they were proud of all their wars, they had confidence in their defense, and they were not impressed by British leadership.
The British point of view was that they thought Americans were poorly trained, disorderly, and they were convinced that colonists were unwilling and unable to defend themselves.
In the First Continental Congress, they adopted 4 measures. One was the rejection of the Intolerable Acts, which caused military preparation and applied economic sanctions against Great Britain. The second was the Declaration of Rights and Grievances, which included a petition to the king to readdress the colonial grievances. Number 3 was the creation of committees in every town to enforce the Suffolk Resolves. And number 4 was if the colonies weren't recognized, the Second Continental Congress would meet in May of 1775.
Second Continental Congress, June 7, 1776, Richard Henry Lee of Virginia introduced the resolution declaring colonies independent instead of reconciliation. There was a committee of 5, they drafted a statement, and Thomas Jefferson wrote the statement. They had 3 rights that they believed in: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They called for independence on July 2nd, and the Declaration of Independence was created and finished on July 4th, 1776. Paul Revere went to William Dawes to warn him and the Minutemen of Lexington that the British were coming. In April 18th, 1775, the Battle of Lexington and Concord began. Poor Americans were killed, a total of 8. There was 250 British casualties, but they don't matter. And then there was Bunker Hill on June 17th, 1775. There was 1,000 British casualties, but the Americans were successful in putting a dent in the British military, and that was all that mattered. Come help your fellow American soldiers. Help them win the American Revolution. Hello, this is Danielle Wood with Crash Course U.S. History. We're going to skip all the detailed parts and go straight to a letter from the microwave. What do you know? It's Common Sense by Thomas Paine. Well, the Common Sense papers are basically saying that America, why are you letting yourselves being ruled by this small little country called Great Britain? I mean, come on, they are thousands of miles away. A small country, by the way, if I did not mention that before, that, I mean, seriously, America, you're this big. Stand up for once. It's freaking common sense. How could you not realize that? Thank you, and have a good day.
Salutary neglect was the policy of avoiding strict enforcement of British laws. The British ignored the colonists because they had problems of their own back in Britain. And the slave trade prospered due to the fact that the British did not care about what the colonists were doing in America at all.
The colonists were ignoring all the British laws because Britain was like a reprimanding mother that is only on Saturdays.
Now, America, it's Saturday, and you have not been obeying my laws. You have been a bad child.
The French. The Indians. Joined together to fight the British. Relations altered forever. The French and Indian War, Lego style. The French were becoming tired of the British pushing westward. The Indians weren't too happy either, which led to Pontiac's rebellion. The colonists, what do they get? The Stamp Act, the Sugar Act, Quartering Act, more taxes. Feeling the love, Britain.
The immediate impact of the Revolution made people realize that all men were created equal. Northern states ended slavery, and some South states freed slaves.
The South saw how important the slaves were to the economy. They tried to rationalize the existence of the slave trade and having slaves work on their farm. Some African Americans could take part in the war, but I disagreed.
The natives tried to avoid war, but they supported the British.
Women worked in the war as cooks and nurses. Some even fought in the war as men. Women maintained the colonial economy. Despite their efforts, they remained second class.
Today we have with us a female colonist to talk about the grievances of the American colonists during the American Revolution.
Well, for starters, they have imposed the Sugar Act of 1764, the Quartering Act of 1765, and the Stamp Act of 1765. All of these act as a threat to colonist freedom to representative government. We feel that we should be able to choose our own taxes. They've also imposed the Townshend Acts of 1767 and the Intolerable Acts of 1774.
The war had become increasingly popular in England because it was very bad for the economy. The Treaty of Paris was signed in 1783, and it provided that the U.S. is independent in Britain's eyes. The Mississippi River was western boundary of the U.S. The Americans have fishing rights off Canada's coast, and the Americans were to pay debts to British merchants and honor loyalist claims for confiscated property.